Episode number 87, IRONMAN Frankfurt with Steph Corker. Welcome to the pursuit of the perfect race. I'm Coach Terry Wilson, and with each episode, I bring stories of athletes to you that share their experiences at races in order for you to learn how to have your perfect race. We will hear stories from athletes of all ages, abilities, and races of all distances. So regardless of where you fit in, there's something in there for you. Thanks for spending some time with me today. Now let the pursuit begin. Hello everyone, and welcome back to the pursuit of the perfect race. Today I have the pleasure of talking with professional triathlete Steph Corker about her recent race experience at IRONMAN Frankfurt. This race took place on July 8th, 2018, with the temperature being 57 and rising to 84. She's been doing triathlons for 8 years now, with the last year as a professional triathlete. Welcome to the show, Steph. I look forward to hearing about your race experience in Germany.
Thanks so much for having me, Terry.
You're welcome. So what made you want to do this race?
Oh, gosh. What made me want to do IRONMAN Frankfurt?
Yeah.
I actually went over to Europe a week ahead of time, and one of my goals for 2018 was to attempt or hopefully conquer a dirty double, which is 2 Ironmans on back-to-back weekends. And it just so happened that Ironman Austria and Ironman Frankfurt provided that, 2 female pro races at both events, and they were a week apart. So I flew over the Thursday before, and I landed in Munich, and I drove down to Austria, and I raced Ironman Austria. And I can't say that Ironman Austria quite went to plan. Whether it was jet lag or nutrition, but my bike really fell apart, and I did my best to hold it together on the run, but it wasn't a great day. And I thought, that's okay. I have a saving grace. I have another race. And I got in my car and I drove back to Munich and jumped on a plane to Frankfurt and had great intentions of having a really great race in Frankfurt. And that also didn't quite happen.
Wow. So now, before you got into triathlon, what were you doing as far as an athlete? Do you have a previous background in any of the 3 sports?
Oh, gosh. So I did grow up swimming competitively and really loved swimming. I loved everything about swimming. I loved training endlessly for short races. I loved racing. I loved setting goals as a 10-year-old. So I grew up swimming and only swimming. I moved across the country from Toronto to Vancouver and decided that triathlon looked really fun. And I did 1 sprint and then signed up for Ironman. And what I can tell you is that I had 0 background in riding a bike or running, and in fact called myself a baby elephant. And by that point in time, to be honest, I wasn't actually really a great swimmer any longer, and I certainly wasn't a great cyclist or runner. So I was as newbie as they come.
Wow. Now, if we look at your training going into this dirty double weekend extravaganza that you had planned, what did your training look like?
So a bit of context is that for the last few years or several years, I have raced 3 to 4 Ironmans a year. And the unfortunate bit for me was that my 4th Ironman, or my last Ironman of the year, seemed to always be my best Ironman. So I thought, what if I shake things up this year and instead focus really hard on the front half of the year of loading a ton of volume and less racing, and then go and try to hammer out 2 races. And it really didn't work for me. So my training wasn't much different other than the fact that I wasn't racing as often. And it was probably actually the longest break. I did Ironman Cozumel last year in November, and then I didn't race an Ironman again until the beginning of July.
Wow. So
it was a lot of training, which I loved, and no complaints. And hey, I tried something new and it just didn't work this year.
Right. Now, if we look at your longest swim, bike, and runs going into this double weekend that you had planned, what would that look like?
You know, it wasn't much different than a normal Ironman build. I would say that the dirty double didn't impact volume. It was rather standard. So I probably logged a handful of 5 to 6 kilometer swims. My biggest bike was, I think, 220K, and my longest run day was 40 in a double run. So not one straight 40K run, but we do a double run, long run day. And I think my longest run was 40K.
What's the double long run day look like?
It's typically like 2.5 hours in the morning and about an hour in the evening.
Okay. What's the idea of splitting it up like that?
Well, 40K for me, baby elephant, is the long way. But 40K across 2 runs that you can really focus on speed and pacing and, a decent warm up that's very slow, made for a really quality, or I find it makes for really quality run sessions for me. So often my long runs are broken up. And I like it. I think it works. It works well.
Okay. I've heard of doing track workouts instead of the typical go out and run the 20 miles or 40K or however kilometers that ends up 30-ish, whatever. I don't really know. But instead of doing that, you just go to the track and do 30 by 1K or 35 by 1K at race pace with 50 to 75% recovery in there. Were you doing anything like that as well?
Wow, I've never done a track session that is that long. So I typically do a track session once a week on Tuesdays, track Tuesdays, but it's not ever usually more than 75 or a 90-minute session.
Okay.
So.
Well, this was actually in place of the long run.
Yeah, interesting.
So that would be the way to maintain the intensity, get the rest that you need during it, and continue through it.
That's a quality session.
Right. Now, were you doing a lot of bricks in training?
I would say I do a few bricks, 2 bricks a week, perhaps. They're relatively short. The runs off the bike are usually quite intentional.
Okay, like 10, 15 minutes or so?
No, I would say a little bit longer than that, but not more than 45.
Okay, were you doing normal strength training as well?
I ebb and flow my strengths program throughout the year. Earlier in the year, I tend to do more, and I'd like to be in the gym about 2 times a week. But sometimes it's not lifting very heavy things as much as just working on my flexibility and core. So it just depends. I find that I have a hard time holding myself back in the gym, and I find that the load that I put on myself in the gym, I usually feel on the bike or the run. So I'd like to try to show some self-restraint there.
Okay. Now, if we take a look at the nutrition that you've been using in training, what would that look like?
My nutrition and training has been actually quite simple, I would say, this year. I'm sponsored by F2C, and so I am an F2C athlete from morning till night. I use their Pharma Greens product in the morning. It's my favorite way to start the day. I use Hydrodurance or Glycodurance for most of my sessions, and I use their vegan protein powder as well. So I would say from a bottle perspective, that's what I'm typically taking in my bottles. And otherwise, I'm also a GU athlete. And so most of my calories come in the form of GU gels, GU chomp blocks. If it's a special day, then maybe a GU waffle.
Okay. Now, if we take a look at the most hours that you trained in 1 week, what would that look like?
I think my biggest hour volume was 26 or 28 hours leading into this summer. It included either a training camp or a long weekend of training. It's not normal for me. I usually hover sort of 20 to 24 hours, I would say.
Okay. Now, with your training, if we look at that over the past 5-6 months or whatever, were there any days where you just mentally didn't want to train?
Yeah.
How'd you get past those?
Well, my struggle this year was that I actually did a few short races earlier in the year that I was really not happy with. And I got down on myself. And so then you wake up the next day and you want to come back fighting. And a couple of times I just came back feeling like a loser and was like, this sucks. And my question that I always ask myself is, I mean, this is a choice spend our days how we want to spend our days. And I would often say, what would you rather be doing? And I've yet to wake up and declare that I'd rather be doing anything other than what I've done. And that makes it really easy. And so there are times that I think I'm a little softer with myself, and, a swim workout might get cut short, or I might need to call in the troops and get a buddy to run with me on a day that's tough. But I genuinely really love the sport, and I love the journey, and I love what I'm learning about myself, especially in the last year. So I find it's less about not wanting to do it and more about a checkup from the neck up, as I like to say, just an attitude adjustment.
Wow.
Because I don't want to do it because I don't feel great. And yet we all feel that way at some point in time, sometime in life. It's like you fall down, get up again. I just felt like I've fallen on my face a few times.
Right. Now, if we take a look at your life just in general, you're training 20-ish hours, 24 to 26 hours a week. What are you doing with the rest of your time?
I run a consulting business with my brother that I'm super passionate about. We are based here in Vancouver, BC, in the Pacific Northwest. And my brother is Matt, and we run a company called the Corker Collective. And we focus on human capital and training and developing humans for really awesome organizations and really cool leaders. And I started the company 4 years ago. And the reason I'm passionate about running a company and being an athlete is because I think the lessons of being an athlete transcend sport. And I think it's very important that leaders do not give up on their health. And I realize not everyone might want to chase professional Ironman goals, but I believe that healthy leaders run healthy businesses. And it is important to me to stay in that game and stay in that conversation. I'm also really passionate about women being in the business world and at the boardroom table. And I'm a really proud female, and I want to be in the game of it. So I would say quite literally, I spend my days training and running a company, and it's not boring, and I am usually tired.
Right. And you're also a coach, right?
And I do coach athletes. I am blessed that I have relatively low maintenance athletes. So we do connect weekly. And I have a smaller roster this year than I have in the past. Mostly just because as you build, for me, I have found as you build deeper relationships, I prefer to have less athletes than more, especially while I'm racing myself. So I do have a great little crew of athletes that I coach.
Nice. And that's with B78 Coaching?
That is with Jasper Blake. He is an Ironman champion based in Victoria, BC. And he has coaches actually all around the world, athletes all around the world, and coaches all around the world.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now, with balancing work, life, training, how does that work for you? Well, I don't know what balance is. And I don't say that flippantly or sarcastically. I just think balance is such an insanely personal word and way of being. I think the most important thing is that I'm getting enough sleep and I'm eating good food. And once I've gotten enough sleep and I eat good food, then I get to train. And so long as I don't miss a workout and I'm on top of my work, then I think, things are in check. So I like to say, make sure you get enough sleep, eat good food, and then get your workout in, but don't you dare miss a workout. Right. So that's how I balance things. Know what matters most, and there's not a lot of room for other things, to be honest. Right. Now, if we take a look at what your taper looks like, transitioning into talking about your training going into this particular race of IRONMAN Frankfurt. We know you had a race the week before that in Austria, so you started your travel before that. But your taper going into Frankfurt, what did that look like? Well, it was tricky because I had just raced an Ironman. So my taper began about 7 or 8 days prior to Austria. I raced Austria. I took 2 days where I just swam after Austria. And then by day 3 post Ironman, I got back on my bike and then I did a run. And those were sort of some test sessions to see if I
felt like my body was recovering in a way that I could pull off another Ironman. And I actually felt really great. So it's unfortunate that the race didn't happen. But yeah, so I would say that it was more of a build off of one Ironman to try to pull off the second Ironman.
Okay.
Less than more of a build into the second Ironman than a taper.
Okay. Now, when did you start traveling to Austria from your home?
On Thursday.
And that race is on Sunday.
Sunday.
So you literally didn't have much time to get over the jet lag from being so many hours ahead.
It was a 9-hour time zone change.
Wow.
And yeah. And so would I have done it differently? Perhaps. Yet under the circumstances of life, I did the very best I could in that circumstance. And I think that, this isn't to sprinkle, sprinkles on a pile of poop. It didn't go well, but the reality is that I think that's the question to ask. Like, did you do your very best under the circumstances that you had? And I did. I flew into what I thought was the best airport. I drove myself down that Autobahn to get to the race venue as quickly as I could. And I slept for 2 days straight. And I was traveling by myself. So it made for, a great ease. It was very selfish. When I was tired, I slept. When I was hungry, I ate. And the race didn't go to plan. That happens.
Wow. So you got to basically the area the Thursday before, and you got a bike box for your bike. I'm assuming you got a bike box for your bike?
I used the Skycon bike bag, which is very easy, very minimal destruction and construction required. So it was, I like to be timed, but I think it takes me about 5 minutes to put my bike together.
Oh, wow. Did you have any issues with the bike checking it in or anything?
No. It was super easy.
Okay, what kind of bike do you have?
I currently ride the Cervelo P3.
Okay. Do you like it?
Yeah. I do like it. Yeah.
Okay. Now, with getting your bike over there to Germany and Austria, what kind of car did you have to get?
It's a good question. Traveling by myself made it very easy because I could load up. So I got the smallest hatchback that could fit all of my things. And there was room for nothing and no one else by the time my luggage was in that car. So it was a Peugeot, I think, but it was full to the top. That's for sure.
Okay. Now, if we take a look at just from a logistical standpoint, you're going across multiple countries in one rental car, flying out of the same airport, right?
Yeah.
Okay. How hard was it to get a rental car in another country?
Well, I rented the car in Germany because Munich was the best airport for me to fly into from Canada. And then you just pay a small country tax to drive across the border from Germany to Austria. Okay. So it was no problem.
Did you have to get a visa or anything like that?
No, you just have to get a certain highway toll sticker.
Okay.
I didn't speak, I still don't. I didn't then and I don't now speak German. But most people spoke some form of English. When I got to the little town, Klagenfurt, where the race was in Austria, there wasn't as much English, but you get by. That's part of the adventure.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's always something with races in other countries is, one, the language barrier, knowing if you're going to need a visa, getting a rental car, like what does that look like and feel like? Because you don't want to find out that you can't get a rental car or you need some type of insurance or what that looks like,
Yeah. I do think there's a business opportunity for someone to create like the 411 help triathletes travel guide of like, these are the types of rental cars you need. These are the airlines to fly, so you don't have to pay as much in bike fees. And there's so many logistics. Under this circumstance, and, again, not to be Debbie Downer, I hadn't had great races earlier this year. I was going over on my own, and I really tried to remind myself constantly how lucky I was to be able to experience the stress I was feeling. So I was like, you are blessed to be stressed. calm down was my mantra getting from Munich to Austria. I was driving around Munich so totally lost. It was pouring rain. I mean, it was just ridiculous. And I was like, this is the adventure of it, Steph. Like, you are so lucky to be so stressed out right now. Suck it up.
Wow.
And 6 hours later, I made it to Austria.
Now, with your cell phone, did you get an international plan?
You know what? I don't know what the plans are like in the US, but in Canada, we have there's a small daily fee up to a cap of $100 for the time that you're away. And because I was traveling on my own and still doing work, I just kept my phone as is. But I do know that some people get SIM cards when traveling, and that's, like 30% cheaper. So it's probably smart.
Now, from the time you woke up on Monday morning to get to the Germany race in Frankfurt, how was that?
Terrible.
Because you just did an Ironman, obviously.
Yeah, I just did an Ironman, and granted, the race didn't go very well. I spoke to my coach on Sunday night, and he said, "It's no problem. The second one's always better for you anyway. Just make sure you stay awake to get back to Germany." I was like, got it. So, it's the problem of you're high on sugar and from the race, but you're really not going to sleep very well. And I had to lug all of my luggage and my sore legs and my chubby feet, drive, first of all, 5 hours, and then get myself through an airport, catch a flight, and get to Frankfurt. So, it wasn't the easiest travel day, and it could have been way worse. I mean, I didn't miss a flight. I didn't get a speeding ticket. I made it, and I got there, and my girl, Rachel McBride, was waiting for me at the Frankfurt airport, and I was so happy to see her. So that made it all the better.
Wow. So you fly into Munich for Austria. You drive 5 hours to race Austria. You fly back to Munich, right? Did I say that right?
I drove back to Munich.
You drove back to Munich, and then you got on another plane to go to another part of Germany.
In Frankfurt. That's right. Yep.
And then that's where you met up with Rachel.
That's right.
Okay. And then y'all shared a rental car.
We didn't actually have a car in Frankfurt. It was really easy we were staying at an awesome homestay right in the city, and we used city bikes a ton, which was amazing. I love them. I love them here in my hometown of Vancouver. And it was really easy. So I only rented a car because I needed to get to Klagenfurt in Austria, and in Klagenfurt, you couldn't really get around without a car. So that made the most sense. But in Frankfurt, no car, no problem. It was great.
Okay. So you get to the race venue and you're going through Ironman Village, checking in. How was the process there?
Yeah, it was great. It was the European Championships, and there was I really like racing in Europe. I had raced Challenge Roth last year, and that was the inspiration for me to come and race in Europe again this summer. And I appreciate the professionalism, I think, that occurs at races in Europe. They take it seriously with enough fun. They don't miss a beat. Everything has a purpose, and it was really seamless.
Okay. Now, going into Frankfurt, what kind of meals were you wanting to make sure that you got before the race?
Meals, you say?
Like food.
Food, yeah. I about two days out from the races when I really care about what I'm putting in my stomach. And prior to that, I just try to eliminate as much refined sugar as I can, and keep it clean. As per every other day. I will say that in Frankfurt, the challenge was that I was ravenous and super hungry post one Ironman. So I wanted to eat a lot. And the challenge for me was just balancing eating too much because I had another Ironman to come. And I will say, obviously traveling with Rachel, she has I say this hesitantly, I would say she has a more sensitive stomach than I do, but as it turned out, we both got a terrible case of food poisoning, and I had the absolute worst stomach. So it's not her stomach that's so sensitive after all. And we did try to cook at home quite a bit. So eliminate eating out, just to keep it simple and keep it to foods that at home.
Okay. Now, did you have a certain meal that you wanted to get the night before the race to prepare you for it?
Well, yes. I do have a pre-race meal that I'd like to have. Unfortunately for me, as I mentioned, we both got food poisoning, but my pre-race meal consisted of a can of ginger ale and a handful of crackers, saltine crackers. So that is called not the perfect pre-race meal.
Wow. So if you could estimate about how much sleep you got the night before the race, what would that be?
I probably slept for, I would say like 6 or 7 hours the night before the race, which is huge. I would also say that I slept for like 6 hours the day before the race while I was violently ill. So sleep was not a problem.
Okay.
Calories was a problem. Yeah.
That makes sense. Now, if you take a look at your race day morning ritual whenever you woke up, what time did you wake up?
Well, so again, like I said, I got a terrible case of food poisoning that hit at about 2:00 on the Saturday before the race. And there were many things that I wanted to do. I needed to change my front tire. I needed to get my bike ready to go. And none of that happened. I was either puking or sleeping instead. And normally I wake up 3 hours before the gun goes off, and about 3 hours before. And in this case, I think I was up about 2 hours before. I had a piece of toast with peanut butter and ran out the door. So
wow,
not ideal.
So whenever you got to transition, how far away from the hotel were you staying from transition?
Yeah, well, the logistics of this race were a little bit interesting. We were staying about a kilometer away from, less than a mile away from the shuttle service. The shuttle took you out to transition to T1 and the swim, and that was 10 kilometers outside of town. So race morning, we took the shuttle out, and I really wanted to start the race. I didn't know, of course, how long I would make it until I could drop out, but I was like, I'm here. And the thing with Ironman is you just never know what can happen. Maybe something turns around at some miraculous point. You feel great. And, you can call me Pollyanna that's wishing and waiting for things to turn out well. It really didn't serve me on race day, waiting for that, because that moment definitely didn't come. But yet here I am, a week and a half later, and I'm really glad that I started. I'm really glad that I tried. DNFing was the worst, but not starting, I think, would have been even more terrible.
Okay. Now, whenever you get to transition, you're not feeling well, but you're still going through the motions that you're going to complete this race. What were you doing?
Well, wait a minute. I was aware that I was going to start this race. There was really nothing in me that thought I was going to finish it, because I wasn't going to walk the marathon just to finish an Ironman. So I was trying to find a way to put my keys in my sports bra so I could get home. I mean, I really wasn't intending on finishing that day.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Unfortunately.
Okay. So that makes more sense now. So you weren't really preparing the bike for the bike ride. You weren't putting your nutrition.
I did prepare the bike. I mean, my bags were checked, and I put everything on my bike to say, if you get on that bike and you're ready to turn it around, I had all of my calories. I had my bottles filled. My worry was that I literally just had I had no calorie content in my body. And I was lightheaded before I started the swim. So that was my biggest worry. It was like, how do I do this? But my bike was loaded. Not much got consumed off my bike, but it was ready for a ride.
Okay. So you leave transition and you make your way down to the swim start, and the men go off and the women are getting ready to toe the line, and you're standing there with all the other women getting ready to go for the pro women. What's the atmosphere there like for you?
Well, it was pretty remarkable. I mean, Jan Frodeno was racing. The men's race was pretty awesome. So there was a ton of hype happening about that. And the women's race was actually meant to be quite large. But by the time race day came, I think there were only 12 or 14 women that were towing the line. Daniela Reef was there. There were some first-time Ironmanners, Iron Womeners, and a really awesome crew racing. So the vibe was high. People were stoked, and it's never a bad day when you get to line up behind Daniela.
Right. Now, the gun goes off and you start your swim. How does the first few hundred yards of the swim go?
Well, I've been working on my swim quite a bit. We train with Jerry Rodriguez at Tower 26. And I had just swum obviously Ironman Austria. And my goal was really like to go out hard and hang on and see who I could swim with. And I had one of my best swims I've ever had, and actually ended up pulling the pack in Austria. So I was excited for the swim, that I was either going like out hard, obviously not to pull a pack in Germany, but, to see what could happen. And the gun went off, and very quickly I realized that my front end speed wasn't there.
Right.
So
how does the next few hundred yards go?
Well, I mean, in the swim, at least for the women's race, there's usually a front pack that forms pretty quickly. And I think we all try to hang on until you don't. And then the second pack forms. And so I was swimming with, I think, 2 or 3 other women for sort of from that 200-yard mark for the duration of the swim. And unfortunately, I was leading them and took them very far off course in my state of not being well. But they followed, and hopefully they had some form of drag or something from me.
Wow. So was the swim nice and calm? Was it choppy? What was the swim like?
Yeah, it was in a beautiful lake, or it might have been a man-made lake. In fact, it was a little bit chilly, but once you got swimming, it wasn't too cold. And it was a non-wetsuit swim for the pros. And I don't remember there being any chop or it feeling choppy by any means. I just do recall the sun was rising as we were swimming back into shore, and there was an Australian exit, so you had to run out. And that's where I swam super off course because I wasn't clear as to where we were swimming into, and the sun was in my eyes. So that was a real thing.
Okay. To back up just a touch, you were able to get a warm-up swim in, right?
They did open it up for warm-up swim. I was the only female pro that stood on the beach and didn't get in.
Okay.
Yeah, I was not well.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you get done with the swim, or let's just start a little bit before that. You're almost done with the swim, about 50 yards before you get out of the swim. What's your mindset at that point?
Well, funny enough, about 50 yards before getting out of the swim is I got caught by age groupers that had started behind us in wetsuits. And I was like, gosh, this day is going from bad to worse really fast if I'm getting caught by age groupers already that have started significantly further back than us. So that wasn't awesome. However, to be honest, Terry, again, I was so sick. I just thought, how do I get myself through transition? And at what part of this bike am I going to give up? And that felt terrible. I mean, it's like, you're about to quit, and that didn't feel great. However, the fact that I didn't feel great in the swim made it easier, because if I had felt great, I wouldn't have wanted to quit. I would have pushed on, and who knows what would have happened. But it was kind of like, I wanted to start. I wanted to give it my best shot. I've just swum for an hour, my slowest Ironman swim ever. It's fair to say that it's not going to be your day. So get out. And the impetus for me was that Rachel was racing, and I was dying to cheer for her and super excited for her to get her Kona spot. And so, I know it doesn't mean as much to her, but for me, I've just come from Ironman Austria on my own, and now I am in Frankfurt with Rachel, and I'm going to cheer for her. And it's my second favorite thing to do is cheer. my favorite thing is to race.
Right. So now you get to transition, you get to your bike. Are you pulling the plug as soon as you get to your bike? What does that look like for you?
Right. I keep telling you these stories, Terry. I'm throwing your questions way off, aren't I? You want this sequentially. You're like, I'm not at the cheering part yet. You're still at the get on your bikes part. Transition was great. You got to run through some sort of kiddie pools to get the sand off your feet from running at the beach. And I mean, I wasn't dead yet. I wanted to get on my bike and figure out a way to get home. So I got through transition as quickly as I could and got on my bike and tried to figure out how to get home.
So you didn't even get on the run course. You didn't get on the bike course.
Well, I did. I rode 117 kilometers before I dropped out.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because it was really hard to drop out. So I did an entire loop of the course.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
You didn't tell that story.
Well, cheering for the marathon was more fun than riding 117K. Let me put it that way.
Okay, so you get on the bike ride. How does the first few miles go for you? Or how do the first few kilometers go for you?
I wasn't well. It didn't feel great. I was puking on the bike. It wasn't good.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now, ideally, did you have a way that you wanted to tackle this from a data perspective of looking at a certain power number or heart rate number or anything like that?
Yeah. I mean, in Austria, I was riding to heart rate. And so my intention was to ride to heart rate in Frankfurt. Under these circumstances, my heart rate was so low that it didn't matter.
Why did you wait so long to pull the cord?
That's a great question. The reality is the way the course was, it was 10 kilometers back into town. But by that point, I was in the mess of a lot of people and I didn't know how to. I was like, oh, I'm in the middle of town, but how do I stop? I don't know. And then you head out of town and you're on a loop. And I didn't know how to stop on that loop. I mean, I guess I could have pulled over to an aid station and like gotten a ride back into town or something. But I just thought that if I do a loop of the course, I'm going to end up back at transition and then I can get my bags and like that would make sense. So, I mean, again, maybe in my state of not being super clear, I thought that felt like the right thing to do. Or to be honest, it might have just felt like the only option. So I just rode a loop of the course before dropping out.
Okay. How was it to actually drop out as a pro? I mean, this is probably your first time to ever DNF and experience this. What was that like emotionally? That had to be hard.
It was terrible. Even feeling terrible. I mean, I knew clearly that I didn't want to just finish a mediocre race. Yet quitting is really hard. Quitting is hard. Ask somebody who's an alcoholic how easy it is to quit alcohol. It's not easy. And I mean, quitting felt like giving up. Quitting felt like, I wasn't going to turn around my state of being sick or ill. And yet the flip was that like, I looked and said, like, I gave it everything I have and all I wanted to do was go home and have a nap. So I knew that I was done.
That makes sense. And I think you made all the right choices of pulling the cord. Whenever you got to transition, were you greeted by a volunteer or an official? What was that like?
Yeah, well, I mean, you sort of go out searching for the race officials, and the pros had GPSs on them. And if we were to drop out, we needed to return the GPS. So I was looking for someone who I could return my GPS to. I found the official and she pulled out her notebook and it was like a list of people who had dropped out. I was like, well, I'm not the first one to do this today. I probably was the first female pro to do it. But you kind of in this awful way think I'm not alone in giving up today. And that sucks. And you look at all the numbers and you're like, man, I'm really sorry. All these people feel the same way I feel right now. but there's nothing else I could do. So I handed in my GPS to the official, but then they wouldn't give me my bags and things. So I had to like beg to get my house keys. So they didn't actually come with me on the swim. So I went and got my house keys and made it back home to have a nap.
Wow.
Yeah. Not how you ever dream of an Ironman going.
So you go back and you take a nap?
I took a nap. Yep. Had a shower.
Did you leave your bike in transition?
No, I had my bike. I could keep my bike.
Okay.
Yeah. So I rode back home.
Okay. So you're allowed to keep your bike, and then you go back, get a shower, get everything settled, and then you take a nap?
I took a nap.
Okay.
Had a shower. Yep.
Okay. So after the nap, you wake up, and then you go back on the course, and then you become a Sherpa.
And then I became a Sherpa. Or maybe just a raving fan.
Okay. So what was it like being on the course now as someone that's not an athlete?
Well, I think knowing that Rachel and I both had food poisoning, I mean, I really felt for her, and I knew that it would have taken some sort of miracle for her to have her best day. And under the circumstances, she didn't need to have her best day, but she needed to have a good enough day to secure her spot for Kona. And as it turns out, I think it might have been her slowest Ironman to date, and definitely not her best day. But I just thought that if I could be of any contribution to helping her get through a marathon under the circumstances of not feeling well, it's all I wanted to do. And so I used the city bikes, and I looked at the map, and I just got out on the course as much as I possibly could to see her. And I missed her actually quite often because she was running too fast for me and my city bike wouldn't get there in time. But yeah, I mean, maybe it was totally selfish of me. I so couldn't just watch the race from the bed and really wanted to be there. So
when was the first time that you saw her on the course?
Well, I saw her about a kilometer into the run, and she was taking like medication of some sort. And I was like, oh gosh, this isn't a good thing. Like, what is going on? And her first loop, so it was 4 10-kilometer loops, and her first loop, she just didn't look totally like herself running. And by the end of the first loop, or maybe the second loop, she was like, my stomach really hurts. And obviously that was what was so sore after food poisoning. And that was what made me, I adore her. I was worried about her. You don't wish anyone to have a tough marathon, but you certainly don't wish Rachel McBride to have a tough marathon. And food poisoning sucks, and especially sucks during a marathon. So, I saw her more times under the circumstance of it not being awesome. And with, I would say, like 14K to go, she just became a different runner. And she just completely got tough and tougher than ever. And she freaking ran. And it was so amazing. So that was also really, really inspiring to witness the ability to turn around a bad day with 14K left in a marathon.
Wow. That's crazy, because like she talked about the mental side of what changed there. And I don't know if she told you that on the way back home or not, but it was something mental that happened, and it was like, wow.
Yeah. It's amazing.
So after she finished, and did y'all stay at the amazing big ass finish line all night, or what did y'all do?
No, it's kind of one of those things where when you do an Ironman, you appreciate what happens, but you kind of hang around and linger for a couple hours, and you're like trying to eat food, but you want to go for a massage, but then you want some more food, but you don't really know what you want to eat. So we were kind of in that state. Well, she was in that state, and I was just there and to be there for her in any way I could. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Well, I only have a few more questions for you, being that we didn't really get to dive into the entire race this time. We can do that next time, obviously. And what's next for you?
I actually don't know. I'm not sure at this moment. A few things I know for sure. One is that I really don't want that to be my last Ironman, certainly not my last Ironman of the year. So I'm wrestling with what the next start line will be. And I also think it's a really important time or a special time to take note of why I do the sport and what am I looking for to continue to get out of the sport, and then set goals appropriately around that. So that's sort of the place I'm at right now.
Okay. So why do you do the sport?
I started the sport because it felt really, really ridiculous to me. Ridiculously impossible, to use Ironman's words. And I've continued to do the sport because nothing has challenged me. Nothing has given me the euphoric high or the heartbreak low that Ironman has. And I take a lot of joy in the day in and day out journey of it. And what I know is that I only get to spend about 1% of the year racing. And I think, especially in this day and age, it's really important to acknowledge things that don't come instantly, and things that might seem boring to other people, but where there is joy, there is a lesson, and there is something special. So, there's still lessons for me to learn. There's still joy I find in the journey, and there's nothing instant I expect Ironman to ever give me.
Okay. Now, if we look at the races that you have on your bucket list, what would we see?
Bucket list races, say. I definitely dream of running fast one day. I mean, that feels like a long shot. But if I could run 10 kilometers fast anywhere, that would be amazing. The Berlin Marathon has kind of been something of interest. Berlin and New York, I think, actually might be two marathons I'd love to run. I'm inspired by ultra running for sure. And could there be something in the world of ultra running? What else? I don't know. There aren't necessarily Ironman races that I would consider bucket list races as much as there are Ironman experiences I'd like to have that haven't happened yet.
Okay. They
can happen at any race.
So how can athletes follow you?
You can find me online on social platforms. I'm at Steph_Corker. My site is stephcorker.com. And I run a company called The Corker Co. And you can find us at The Corker Co. Instagram, etc.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Well, I only have one more question for you, and that's, what's your definition of a perfect race?
Definition of a perfect race. I mean, I want to say that there is something about the perfect race that involves getting to the finish line a better person than you were at the start. Because I don't think a perfect race is where everything goes perfectly to plan, but I think a perfect race is where you are able to courageously, guts, grit, call it what you want, overcome what's thrown at you, and finish as a better person for it. And that's why I do sport. And I've had a lot of very beautifully imperfect races that have left me on a quest for a perfect race. Yet I think there's something really beautiful about becoming better. And that might be faster or stronger, but it might be more resilient. It might be, maybe it's more gentle with myself. But a better person is a pretty sweet end goal, I think.
Wow. Well, that's great. Really appreciate your time today, Steph. I've really enjoyed having you on and hearing about your experience and learning from you. I would love to have you back on after your next race, wherever that may be, and
thank you.
Do a full episode with you. It'd be great.
I love it. Thank you for your time, Terry.
Awesome. You have a good day, okay?
You too.
Thanks for tuning in today. I hope you were able to learn something from today's episode. If you enjoyed the show, please take a minute to leave a review on iTunes or share it with a friend. Be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. If you'd like to see pictures from this athlete's race, Learn more about who I am, what I'm doing, or be on the show yourself to share your story, check out my website at CoachTerryWilson.com. Until next time, continue the pursuit.